Hello, and thank you for joining us for this World Council of Credit Unions virtual event. Are credit unions truly prepared for Generation Z? My name is Greg Newman, Director of Communications for World Council. Well, between supporting members through the pandemic, digital transformation, dealing with mergers, and pushing to stay competitive, credit unions are facing multiple threats simultaneously. Each missed signal poses risk to relevance, revenue, reputation, and declining membership. And there is one specific oversight that many credit unions are falling into right now. Generation Z, which consists of people born between 1997 and 2012, is now the dominant demographic in the world, said to have $360 billion in spending power in the U.S. last year alone, and representing 32% of the global population as of 2020. Given the major market opportunity Gen Zers present, credit unions need to address this generation immediately. That's the message you'll hear today from our presenter, Paige Strand, Communications Manager with Central One Credit Union in Vancouver, Canada. She manages Central One's external and internal communication strategy, thought leadership, change management, media relations, and stakeholder engagement for Central One's digital platforms and financial technology. If any questions come to your mind as you listen to Paige's presentation today, please feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and type them in there, and we'll be asking her some questions as time allows. We also are offering Spanish interpretation today, so tómese un momento para hacer clic interpretación y elija su idioma, inglés o español. And this presentation is being recorded and will also be available later today on the World Council YouTube channel. So Paige, without long introduction, I thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Greg. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paige Strand, based in Vancouver, Canada. As a lifelong credit union member, millennial, certified change management practitioner, and communications manager at Central One, I can look at this topic across several perspectives. I have a decade of communications and marketing experience, and I want to provide it to you to support you wherever you are in your planning today. It feels great to be able to have this dialogue with each of you wherever you're watching this. My goal here today is not to prescribe, but to coach. A lot of what I'm about to say is intended as collective dialogue around how the credit union community can further drive value to members all over the world. How you implement these concepts will vary depending on your credit union's strategy, the needs and demographics of your community, and how your communication strategy already aligns from a multi-generational perspective. Many of you are already implementing powerful strategies that focus on the needs of Generation Z. So in discussing this together today, my hope is to come closer to accomplishing this as a team and a global community. Now, first a quick introduction to Central One and what we do. At Central One, we provide products, services, and support for credit unions in Canada to best support their members and communities. We engage, we listen, we collaborate with credit unions all over Canada on how to continuously make improvements to the system while providing diverse products and services, including those in treasury, payments, and digital banking. It's important to note that Central One does not have consumers as members. We empower credit unions in supporting their members. So part of why I'm here with you today is to provide you with resources and data to make informed decisions in your communications planning that are best for you. Grounded by our role and purpose to enable a thriving credit union system, we cooperatively empower those who deliver banking choice to Canadians, and we aim to drive value for credit unions and even other non-credit union institutions as well. We aggregate volume to provide access to critical services, and we collaboratively develop strategies, products, and thought leadership by leveraging our collective expertise and understanding of the credit union system. So, what will we talk about today? We're going to highlight Generation Z, who they are, why they're crucial to credit unions, and why credit unions are crucial to them. We're going to look at how they compare to millennials and should be considered more intentionally as their own demographic. We'll also look at credit union awareness from a Generation Z perspective, member demographics, and where credit unions on average have performed well. We're also going to spend some time validating the important work credit unions do and how many complex focuses there are as they build value and support for members. We'll also conduct a deep dive through the session into some of their behavioral patterns, leveraging them towards considerations we can all look to apply within our communications, our storytelling, and even our marketing strategies moving forward. We'll also be having a Q&A, which I'd actually like to leverage as an open discussion here. If you don't have a question about our topic today, please share with us an idea that could help credit unions prepare for Gen Z, or one that your credit union has already implemented. As always, in leveraging our experiences collectively as a group, we can leave here today feeling validated in our successes and also motivated in finding new ways of working. So, a dilemma to start. Before we begin on my topic, I'd like to begin with a brief story of a dilemma I'm facing. My little cousin Anthony's birthday is coming up, and I'm just not sure what to get him for a birthday gift. I know he likes playing with cars, he likes chicken nuggets, he likes pestering his mom for more time to play on his iPad. This is complicating my ability to get him the ultimate birthday gift. And part of that is because Anthony is turning 20. It can be really difficult for me to see Anthony as my cousin that's all grown up, instead of the little cousin I often remember him as. Time's gone by so quickly, and unless I show up with a Tesla, playing with cars is just no longer going to cut it. I do struggle in what to discuss with him, and I'm often surprised by what's really going through his mind versus what I think is going through his mind, even as a millennial, not much older than him. Well, that might be a stretch. It's hard to believe that Generation Z is already entering the workforce as adults, while some are nearing this stage as teenagers. This has all come up really quickly, and being prepared to embrace them is essential. So how are we doing in that realm? And how can we make sure that we're aware of their needs in order to plan and communicate intentionally with them? Looking at the slide here of who is Generation Z, we need to know exactly who they are. So they were born between 1997 and 2012. They're now the dominant demographic, said to have recently overtaken millennials. They're said to have over 360 billion spending power in the US last year, according to Bloomberg. And they also represent 32% of the global population as of 2020, making them a very powerful group. So before we move forward, why are we focusing specifically on Gen Z? Often when we look at topics on attracting and retaining young members, the focus is often on millennials. There's an immediate association between millennials and Generation Z as the digital generations, but there's also been a lot of dedication already to understanding what millennials need and want, comparatively more than specifically on the Generation Z experience. It's also important to know that what I'm about to share is representative of research today and not representative of every member of Generation Z. This information is intended to help us gain familiarity, and the illustration of Gen Z will likely grow with time as more research and data is collected. I can tell you anecdotally that even in researching to validate my findings, I did dig quite significantly to find data specifically to Generation Z alone versus millennials or Generation Z and millennials. We've seen a lot of work and focus on millennials, and as a millennial, thank you for that. But I also found this incredibly validating to why we're all here today. We can't just assume that Generation Z wants are parallel to millennial wants. And even assuming their wants in general, continuing to perceive them as children is only going to make it harder to understand and fully meet their needs. So are they really the same? Yes, millennials and Gen Z are often considered young adults, and they do share strong preferences for education, digital engagement, and technology. With these similarities in mind, it might seem efficient to target both generations with the same material. But given how much power Generation Z seems to hold as a demographic, are we willing to make a bet specifically on data focused mostly on millennials? In digging across several resources, millennials are often considered to be financially optimistic compared to the pragmatic Gen Z. Millennials are often more likely to trust online reviews, while Gen Z trusts influencers and real people more. Millennials are often more inclined to put their money towards experiences, while Gen Z puts their money towards practical products or investing more often. Millennials are typically more brand-driven, while Gen Z is less drawn to brand names, but more interested in organizations that are taking action in their communities. Unsurprisingly, all of these will pop up as themes through this session. So let's think this through a step further. What are some of Gen Z's traits in summary, based on the research that we have so far? Digital-first Gen Z is surprisingly frugal and money conscious, with 80% using mobile banking at a much younger age than previous generations, according to a report from Morgan Stanley. With a minimalist approach, they're more inclined to save and invest than to spend. And some are reported to even be putting away a third of what they make, and often working with parents on reducing their costs to save. They're also passionate about their communities, with 80% factoring environmental, social, and governance issues into their decision-making per an EQ 2021 poll. In general, consumers today seem more environmentally and socially conscious than in past, but Generation Z takes it to that next level in their spending patterns. And despite being frugal, they're willing to pay more to invest in organizations with proven track records on ethics, philanthropy, diversity, and inclusion. They're also very vocal against injustice and have strong opinions on causes and social issues. Often seen as frugal and financially literate individuals that care for their communities, Generation Z stands to be the ideal member for credit unions who do a great job of embodying financial well-being with strong community values. And yet, a 2022 survey by Go Banking Rates just this year, just a few months ago, revealed that Generation Z are less likely to bank with credit unions than they are with national and/or online banks. This is really hard to take in when we know how aligned in values this generation is with credit union focuses. So why could this be the case? One way to look at it is, does Gen Z understand the credit union narrative? There have been sources indicating that awareness of credit unions and what they do has typically been on the lower side with younger generations. A survey by Zogo Finance, a startup geared towards increasing Gen Z financial literacy, found that 75% of those surveyed claimed they weren't really sure what a credit union is or does. There's also a common misconception in some regions that one must be part of a labor union in order to be able to join a credit union at all. Another perception noted was that technology might be a little bit different and user experience might differ from banks as well. Those surveyed who were somewhat familiar of credit unions occasionally perceived them as lo-fi banks that offer only a handful of basic services. Many credit unions offer free checking, savings, lower fees, better rates and terms, and sometimes more services than banks, which should appeal to Gen Z. There's also personalized service and care for their communities, which often does not come with bigger banks. I know there's a lot of factors here to work with, but let's focus on a few that are in our control and where we can go next. And let's also consider the demographics in which credit unions typically perform well. According to data analytics company Trellix, the average age of credit union members in 2018 was 47 years old. Other sources in later years have yielded similar findings, with credit union members often in their mid to late 40s and up. Go Banking Rates also surveyed on this topic, and they found 60% of credit union members were 65 and older. To continue to have powerful membership, credit unions focusing in on younger generations could likely see very positive effects on their growth in membership. With the likelihood of aging membership, it's also important to consider this for the future sustainability and continuity of credit unions as pillars in our community. And this comes from attracting and supporting younger demographics. This can also be easier said than done, especially now more than ever. Everyone is working diligently at their credit unions to perform through incredible pressures and be there for their members in every way possible. The work your teams are doing is very important, and the amount of work you are balancing across many challenges and changes, especially in recent years, has been insurmountable. Credit unions have been working very hard for years to support their members through the pandemic, either in providing government support, establishing aid programs, adapting services to accommodate members as much as possible, all while navigating the complexities themselves from a business and employee perspective. There's also a big focus of incorporating elements for digital transformation. And actually, a global survey by Harvard Business Review indicated that executives expect the pressure to digitally transform will only accelerate and intensify with time. And they also said in that same survey that they expressed concern on their organization's ability to change fast enough to thrive in that increasingly digital world. With leaders often identifying digital transformation as a top priority, credit unions have had their eye firmly on this evolution for some time. There's been cybersecurity incidents on the rise, and staying up to date and prepared for that is also a major priority per PwC. There's also mergers and acquisitions. So, pursuing scale is also an increasing focus with, a report from Deloitte stated in Canada, there were actually over 3,200 credit unions as of 1966. And by 2012, there were less than 370. I just want to repeat that for emphasis, 3,200 to less than 370. The desire to leverage collaboration and cooperation to compete is growing, and sometimes necessary to bring forward a strong member experience. This also requires plenty of focus and a lot of movement. Before we move on here, credit unions are in many ways the heroes of our communities. They step up to serve and protect in times of challenges, all while navigating multiple focuses and threats simultaneously. With so much on the go and resources stretched across many projects, it can become easier to have blind spots in our communications and content strategies, even with incredible teams, talent, and planning structures. Each missed signal poses risk to relevance, revenue, reputation, and membership. And there's one oversight that many credit unions are falling into right now, and that is being equipped to handle Gen Z members. So let's take what we've covered so far, go a little deeper into some of these observations, and see where we can evaluate them as considerations, later turning them into best practices. Consideration 1, a more conservative generation. When we think of young people in finance, an often seen perception in media is that millennials are very much in debt and struggling to buy property. This is actually not as likely the case for Generation Z. They're still considered very young, yet they're said to research financial planning now by age 13 and learn about finance through family members who are often members of the same financial institution. Social media is also a significant area of learning, but we'll cover that more shortly. And why so frugal and wealth conscious? As research advisory firm Gen Z Planet points out, quote, they're kids of the 2008 recession, and now they're the graduates of the COVID pandemic. These two things really influenced a lot of how they view money, end quote. Watching political events unfold, climate change, war, terrorism, economic and political unrest, having life as we know it adapt on a whim through a global pandemic, I can empathize with the skepticism that many in Gen Z are experiencing. And it's possible that seeing instances of volatility have curbed Gen Z into a very strong financial position through risk aversion and a desire to learn. It's easy to see where that anxiety has kind of been built in for them. And Deloitte actually confirmed that in a report just last week. Gen Z has also watched millennial spending and student debt spiral into unsustainable patterns and are looking to prevent financial stress for themselves with long-term strategies and healthy habits. In a nutshell, they're cautious about their finances and want to set themselves up for success from an early age. Generation Z really cares. More than 500 Gen Z in the US were surveyed on the importance of their financial goals just last year, with the majority falling into the very category when it came to how important it was for them to be financially independent, saving for retirement, buying houses, all while remaining low in debt. This is top of mind even for teenagers at the moment. All are trying to navigate complexities, get through unscathed, be prepared, and thrive financially. The majority also reported here feeling financially behind or ill-prepared, despite many having between 3 to 12 months of savings set aside. And a 2021 Banking Consumer Trends report from Oracle confirmed this as well, stating worry as the primary motivator for many young people in their financial planning. Given how often Gen Z and millennials are lumped together, let's note their differences here. Both spend plenty of time on social media, but are motivated in different ways. In having financial worries, it's clear that Generation Z are quickly looking for answers to protect themselves and financially thrive in the long term. Outside of family members, Gen Z relies significantly on social media and finance influencers, turning frequently to TikTok and Instagram, among many others. Comparatively, millennials were more likely to respond to blog and Facebook posts. Generation Z has more financial resources to invest and the will to make that happen, all at a very young age. So how could we leverage this information to better support them while also attracting their attention? Knowing what we've just covered, let's take a moment for a checkpoint. You can look at these on your own or even assess these with your communications and marketing teams. How do you engage or listen in to your younger members? So circling back to my example with Anthony, it's often easy to assume what's needed versus leaning in and listening, even as marketing and comms teams. While often lumped in with millennial traits and patterns, investing time in what Generation Z truly needs could go a very long way. Also, what kind of communications campaigns could hold impact here to retain them? Knowing that young membership typically starts at the family institution of choice, it's worth considering when to engage young members and knowing how much earlier financial topics are popping up for them. Assuming they'll stay because their parents are is not enough. Is there a way to survey them to gain a better sense of what they are looking for, or even examine popular Gen Z frequented mediums like TikTok to see what specific topics are of interest? Are there storytelling methods to showcase ESG initiatives to show them how credit unions care and invest in their communities? Credit unions typically focus in more on educating their members and communities compared to larger banks. And it could be that shifting some of what we do really well into a Gen Z format could be a major success. Are there ways to assure Gen Z through their financial worries to maintain their loyalty? Understanding their pragmatic approach to finance, how can credit unions leverage their expertise to better prepare Gen Z for adulthood and be there as their advisors along the way? Could there be benefit to offering webinars and content specifically to address their needs and worries to help them feel valued as members, maintaining their loyalty? Could there be opportunities to partner with local districts to introduce youth earlier to the importance of saving, spending, budgeting, and how to hit their financial goals? And are there education resources that can be targeted in a format more aligned with Gen Z? This is a very different generation with very different motivations, and they don't want to be spoken down to or handed assumptions based on their age. They're not sitting idly as we often envision kids to do, and they're not playing with cars, and they're not eating chicken nuggets. They're consuming information and learning at a rapid pace. Catering educational resources like interactive webinars, blogs, quizzes could be of value and help nurture that relationship with younger membership. But just because we're focusing in on what's important to Gen Z doesn't necessarily make that a done deal. Consideration 2, quick, captivating stories and experiences. So let's go a bit deeper into what we were just learning about Generation Z. We've talked about how Generation Z often pursue their own learning and wanting to be financially independent and thriving. I've shared teasers of some of the most shared finance videos on TikTok to give you an idea of what's being shared right now and topics that are very much of interest for users. The topics younger generations are seeking advice on do make sense when you consider the areas of personal finance that they're most confused about or find most daunting, like, financial paperwork, mortgages, doing taxes. But aside from basic money management, is also a strong desire for growth in entrepreneurial content. Common trends across TikTok and Instagram in particular are videos explaining NFTs, cryptocurrency, inflation, interest rates, how to save for down payments, start their own small businesses, invest accordingly to retire very young. To illustrate this even further, the hashtag for finance trends regularly and has been used nearly 7 million times on TikTok alone, while the hashtag personal finance has over 8 billion views across TikTok and Instagram. It's also important to note that as financial influencers become increasingly popular for Gen Z, there's also an increase in likelihood of a misinformation spread, giving us all the more reason to consider this space and where credit unions can potentially exercise their expertise to ignite interest and keep audiences informed on their options and what they do. Quick decisions. We know that Gen Z are very interested in wealth building, retirement planning, and entrepreneurial strategy, particularly through social media. And with a lifetime of consuming micro content through mediums like TikTok, Vine, Snapchat, Instagram, Gen Z will typically give 8 seconds before making a decision. Part of why TikTok has appeal is the concept that each piece of content ranges from a few seconds to a minute long, making it easy to consume a lot of information in brief segments of time. Every TikTok finance video that I just showed you was under 37 seconds long. Vine's 6-second videos, Snapchat story limit being 10 seconds, even YouTube's 6-second pre-roll ads are a few examples where leading platforms have adapted to suit shorter attention spans in recent years. And noted by Forbes as the TikTok generation, over 60% of TikTok users fall within Gen Z. And earlier this year, TikTok also revealed that 50% of TikTok users surveyed said they found videos longer than 1 minute to be stressful. This actually makes a lot of sense because 1 in 4 of TikTok's highest performing videos do fall in the app's recommended optimal video length of 21 to 34 seconds. This really highlights the need for content to be fast, easy to consume, and located on platforms that Gen Z typically frequent. Knowing what we've covered, let's take a moment for a checkpoint. Do you feel that Gen Z is aware of what your services are, your advantages are, and what you offer? We know that older generations are very aware of credit union offerings and advantages, and they're often long-term loyal. As we kind of explored before, could it be that Generation Z's preference towards big banks or online institutions chalks up mostly to brand awareness? Building stories and content that's relevant while utilizing methods and channels they're looking for could yield very positive results. Maybe there isn't room in your communication strategy for TikTok at the moment, but what traits behind it could you take away to embody in your content? So for example, I love writing a 2,000-word long-form blog post, but I know that targeting Gen Z with this could be stressful. Whereas if I created a version that embodied 4 quick takeaways or a short video that I can share across social media, that might be a step in the right direction towards Generation Z. Even having an Instagram account can also address this, as there's now further abilities and customizations to share quick video and micro content. There's also a lot that can be learned about emoji culture to help reinforce effort in engaging them. And maybe you sit on the other side of the spectrum where there is room for TikTok, which could be a very powerful method to gaining that brand awareness and trust through financial literacy resources and engaging micro content right at the center of where Generation Z thrives. From the trending TikTok videos we saw, Gen Z is evidently willing to research the best choices for them and will stay with brands that offer that quick fire engagement and align closely with their values. Understanding where credit unions regularly outperform bigger financial institutions in people-first customer service and community values, there's a lot to be won here. Many credit unions are doing a great job at catering to Gen Z. So more thought and investment into targeted content for this group could be a major benefit for the credit union system as a whole. Consideration 3, integrating digital with personal. During the pandemic, The Economist said that 59% of banking executives believe the branch-based banking model will be obsolete by 2025. We've seen a lot of these thoughts pop up through the pandemic, like how users might want to avoid face-to-face banking or avoid speaking with humans entirely going forward, or even articles questioning how long branch banking will last. But Generation Z shows this transition fully to digital and self-serve might not necessarily be the case, with a frequent perception being that millennials and Gen Z prefer digital methods over human methods. It actually depends on the specifics of the interaction. For example, where millennials are very consistently digital-oriented, Gen Z are as well, but still appreciate human interaction to help validate what they've found or to get help. This may also explain why they appreciate influencers over online reviews. Growing up in an immersive digital environment, we know device-prone Gen Z want that seamless, customized digital experience. But 2020 research from Morningstar also confirmed that they do still want to talk to humans for advice, implying some of what we know already about their pursuit of learning, their approval of a more human approach and people-first ESG initiatives, their desire to getting ahead financially and avoiding millennial mistakes, or even their preference for quick and efficient experiences. This actually isn't too surprising. Human connectivity is still a comfort, it's just in a different way than in previous years. Business Insider Finance pointed out that this may be a result of wanting to get ahead and validate their own learning. And in a nutshell, Gen Z does prefer independent learning through technology as the first point of contact, with human advisors as a later point once they've conducted their own searches. Similar to what we saw with consideration 2 and the need for brief and efficient content, this concept also applies to Gen Z's expectations of customer service. While at first glance, this feels like less of a communications and marketing focus, it actually does impact the member experience in retaining the members attracted by the communications, content, and marketing in the first place. You can't have members without one or the other. Both sides are equally important. Although advanced digital offerings provide the convenience of self-serve banking, Gen Z wants resolution quickly when it comes to errors and confusion. While 70% of consumers are using self-serve channels to report problems, only 9% of users are managing to fully resolve their issues quickly without having to speak to an agent. And we actually saw quite a bit of data that pointed to this. An ability to solve financial or technical problems effectively and quickly should be the cornerstone of the customer retention strategy, especially with the objective of acquiring and retaining Gen Z. Turning members away at the desk would have been unthinkable a few decades ago. So the same must apply when a member is inquiring about a challenge or question, either online or by phone. Quick response is also very important to them, as we know they're more inclined to move brands if they're not fully satisfied. An Elitico case study found that more than half of Generation Z respondents considered switching as a result of a bad service experience. It's also important to note that Gen Z leaving brands, if not fully satisfied, goes both ways when it comes to how they're treated by bigger banks and online institutions. Note that how credit unions typically perform well with warm community values, authentic customer service compared to bigger banks or online banks, the latter of which sometimes do not have advisors to speak to at all. This could be further reinforcement that reducing the gap between credit unions and Gen Z might not be as uphill or challenging as perceived. Knowing that bigger banks and online financial institutions sometimes falter in customer service, this is a strong opportunity for credit unions to outperform. So let's take a moment for a checkpoint. Are there areas where communications and customer service approaches can more closely align to Gen Z expectations? There's a lot of varying research in how Gen Z wants to be interacted with, reinforcing the importance of listening in, maybe through member data and surveys. Do you feel that your member-facing staff are prepared with messaging and resources to best support? So as communications and marketing experts, sometimes we can look to digital transformation and user experience efforts to satisfy a lot of our work. And often this does simplify processes and make for a stronger member connection. Though making the assumption that this satisfies younger generations entirely, almost to the extent of eliminating human connectivity, is a bit of an overstep. So are there further opportunities to tweak your customer service messaging with Gen Z in mind? Does your digital strategy incorporate human touchpoints, transparency, empathy? The goal of technology and digital transformation is to make the experience more human and more intuitive. Ideally, in synthesizing and streamlining processes, there's more time to focus on content planning, relationship building, and advising real people through their lives. Digital makes it so that members have access to their banking and can self-serve easily, while also being able to access that human expertise as they desire to. So, putting our considerations into practice. So, whether you're an expert or beginner, when it comes to communications and content planning, I've prepared a few easy suggestions for content, no matter what methods or channels you prefer to use right now at your credit union. So in engaging Generation Z and understanding what we know about them, leveraging your member data and surveys to address those fears that Gen Z have, and any frequently asked questions could go a really long way. With the goal here to build trust and, building trust by being seen and being heard, being a presence in their lives, focusing more storytelling on your ESG initiatives and community commitments. So not just speaking about your action, but demonstrating it, demonstrating what you are doing. You could even use the influencer impact to your advantage and see where there could even be maybe a face of your credit union, which can help to advocate for certain topics in your content and be a familiar point of recognition in your content planning for your audience. There's also reinforcing learning resources to empower Gen Z while easing their feelings around volatility to help empower them. There's also focusing in on maintaining their attention spans. So understanding what we know about shorter attention spans, keeping your key messages and visual content minimal and to the point is very necessary. Try to eliminate any filler content as much as you possibly can and tell them only what they really need and want to know. Unsurprisingly, try keeping your content as brief as you can, whether that's converting a 2,000-word blog post into a 200-word version, or using short videos to convey your messaging, or implementing social media strategy that kind of dives into more of the channels that Gen Z are more familiar with using. Remember when we previewed some of those trending finance videos, how the text was overlapped easily to see the topic before any of us would be able to click? This helps for your audience to quickly identify your content as worthy and scan quickly through the important points. A recommendation when targeting any demographic is keep your call to action as clear as possible, whether it's to connect, subscribe, learn more, or even take a survey. Tell them exactly what they should be doing next, helps establish that clarity, and ideally facilitate further engagement with them. Understanding what we know of Gen Z's preference for self-serve, followed by the option for human interaction. There's many ways we've seen this enabled through COVID-19. Many credit unions shifted to virtual meetings with their members or the option for it, or enabled online banking for, online booking for branch visits. There's also been integrating digital signatures, which has eliminated the need to physically go to a branch. These were quick transitions at the time to keep people safe, but in the long term, movements like these move towards more flexible banking that can accommodate many different lifestyles and working hours. Maintaining a human experience and directing Gen Z towards resources they can explore themselves and communications that they can kind of consume as they would like, or even maintaining occasional interactions that you're there for them when they need will likely increase the feeling that they have someone trusted that they can go to when they have questions and have them feel valued as members. In the event of a customer service interaction, maintaining our standard credit union magic of treating them as real people rather than as a number in the system will continue to go a long way, while giving them opportunity to resolve their own challenges quickly and possibly bypass interaction if more convenient in that moment. With such alignment on financial planning and community values, Generation Z and credit unions seem like the perfect match. It just requires both parties to truly see it and lean in. Generation Z might be choosing big banks or online institutions initially. Making strategic choices as credit unions could be a very smooth transition, considering how credit unions appeal naturally to Gen Z's preferences. If credit unions can make further moves to meet them where they're at and in what they need for support, this could be a significant power move for credit unions and their member bases. Before we jump to Q&A, it's been an absolute honor to share expertise and considerations with you. I'm really confident in how we as a credit union system will continue to adapt and evolve for the good of our members all over the world. And I'd also like to take a moment to thank World Council of Credit Unions for having me today. If you happen to think of a question or comment after the session, please don't hesitate to send me an email or even just find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat on these kinds of topics, or even just hear feedback on today's session. You can also learn more about Central One at www.centralone.com. Remember, if you don't have a question about our topic today, please share with us an idea that could help credit unions prepare for Generation Z, or one that your credit union has already implemented that has worked well. Over to you, Greg.
Paige, thank you so much. I got to say, I learned a lot as a communications person doing this. And I think the biggest thing I learned was that Gen Z is saving at the levels that you mentioned. You know, I hear all the time people my age and older saying, well, we feel bad for this younger generation because they're not going to have money to put away for retirement. And lo and behold, they're putting away more money than I was at that age for sure. I mean, were the things that you found, we do have a number of questions from the audience that we'll get to. Were there things that you have found through your research that you found surprising is my first question.
Absolutely. I was actually very taken aback by financially literate by age 13, like really pursuing those channels to be able to, find out how can I save for university? How can I save for a down payment? How can I retire early? I would not have expected, I understand that Gen Z is very digital and very pro-learning, and they're one of the most educated demographics of all of the demographics. But I was very taken by surprise, just in, by age 13 they have all of this information. And even just thinking about where I was at age 13, I was definitely not there.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, and I think part of that probably too, maybe it came out of the financial crisis a little bit that there's a little bit more focus on this type of thing now. I want to get to some of the questions we have from our attendees. Sai has asked, because you showed some statistics regarding Gen Z, their spend power. Sai is wondering if you have Canadian specific stats on the percentage of Generation Z and their spend power in Canada.
That's a great question. I know that I saw quite a bit of research specific to Canada. I'd have to check my notes on the exact numbers pertaining to that section.
And then, and this is, I guess, if you have, has Central One launched any programs to your most loyal members? You mentioned that over the age of 55 had that loyalty to credit unions to encourage their grandchildren maybe to become members. If so, what's worked, what hasn't? I don't know if Central One has gone into that kind of marketing yet, though.
That's a really good question. So again, it's important to note that at Central One, we do not have consumers as members. Our role in the system is to empower credit unions in supporting their members. So when we're looking at, like even just in me being here today, the goal is to kind of help be able to establish some of those conversations in terms of, future planning and what's down the line, and how to support our members. There's always a lot of opportunities to explore there.
And this is one that I think is interesting, and I know personally of one example I can give, but somebody put down, this is anonymous attendee, says, I noticed a credit union ad recently that took a more dismissive voice in regards to social media financial content. Do you have any examples that you've seen of credit unions and embracing and succeeding with platforms like TikTok? I know I have seen a few. I'll let you go first, Paige.
Definitely. So what I've seen, and I don't want to misquote, so I might share this on LinkedIn later. Find me on
Sure.
LinkedIn, you'll see the information. But there was an institution, I believe they were in the States, and they had actually done a great example of influencer marketing through their institution. So being able to have that point person and that face, that was an example, especially when we look at the data on TikTok. You can see where that impact could have a great line of sight to Generation Z and what their trends and needs are. But I think there's ample opportunity in what you can do with these platforms. And even if you decide, this platform or this platform or this platform, you can only choose one, that's okay. All the effort, all of the planning, and all of the thoughtfulness will pay off. It's just really making sure that we can keep in mind the difference in the demographics, because I think that's been a gap that we've seen across many industries, actually.
Yeah, and from my own personal experience hosting webinars here, we did a webinar not that long ago, and one of the participants was from Frankenmuth Credit Union in, I believe, in Indiana. They had just started TikTok at that time, and this was probably April or May. But at that point, their TikTok had only been up for 2 weeks. They had posted 7 videos, and I know that they had said all of those videos were short, like 7 seconds or less. But they had already had 20,000 views of the
Oh,
7 videos. So that's one example. The other example I want to give for people, and I can't give this person enough of a shout out, as somebody to emulate. I will never ever be able to figure out how to be as creative as this person, but there's a marketing person for our member credit union association in Brazil called Secredi, and anybody who has done a lot with World Council knows about Secreti, but Carolina Mussolini is their social media guru, and I'm putting her Instagram in the chat for everyone to click on. She is an
Yeah.
absolute whiz when it comes to these videos targeting Gen Z and maybe even older, younger millennials. I would
Mm,
just I would encourage everyone to go. If you don't speak Portuguese, you probably won't understand everything, but you'll see kind of the methods she uses and the way she engages people. And I can't stress enough just how engaging a lot of her stuff is. Question from Mark. He wants to know, is there an area of underwriting standards credit unions aren't considering to get some Gen Z applicants approved of loans? I don't know if that's in your wheelhouse or not, but
Communications, we do wear a lot of hats. That is not a hat that I currently wear, but I'm sure that there is somebody out there who would be able to answer that question better than I.
yeah, that's one of those that I think probably is something that lending departments all over now are probably going to look at and say that's a great question, and we need to find out if there's an answer to that. Yeah, Mark, maybe that's something that there can be some research on our part too, because I think that would be interesting for a lot of people to understand. I'm just going to quickly, we got a question in Spanish here, so I want to make sure that I get this asked. So I'm going to quickly translate what the question is, and then we'll get an answer for you here. So the question is, well, this is more of a comment for you, I guess, saying that we need to know the profile of Generation Z in each particular place. They're saying we're from Peru, and you could help us outline the questions for that study based on what we saw today. So they're thanking you for that. But that's probably a
Oh,
good thing to recognize too. That even though Generation Z is monolithic as we look at them, or that's the way we look at them, that
mhm.
probably is in reality not the case. That in different parts of the world, Generation Z is going to have variations, right?
Exactly. And that's why I tried to take that time at the start, as I mentioned, finding millennial data, so much. Gen Z and millennial data, quite a bit. Finding Gen Z data, you have to look and you have to be intentional in, the validity of your sources. I know that as we start to do more research and this becomes a greater focus, we will see a lot of diversity of that information. So a lot of what I presented today, it'll be interesting to see how that fares over the next couple of years as we do get more information to build out that profile of what Gen Z are looking for.
Yeah, we don't have any other questions, Paige, but I'm wondering if I know you've mentioned it before, if people are interested in contacting you after this, or maybe they want to refer someone to you, what's the best way they can get in touch with you?
Great question. So you can always find me on LinkedIn at Paige Strand. You can see my name. And then also by email at Central One. So that would be P Strand, Strand, at centralone.com. And if for any reason I can't answer your question in some way, kind of to what we saw before, I can try to help you as best I can in connecting if I for some reason don't have that answer for you.
That's great. I'm just making sure we don't have any more questions here before we. Well, just one comment here and a question from Paulo. He says, "Congratulations, Paige. As you said, Gen Z is aware of financial education and savings, among other things. So, how can we communicate and create engagement with our principles and values and make those look cool and practical for them?" That is a great question because I think that's something, it's not just Gen Z, but credit unions struggle with that with millennials as well, I feel like.
Definitely. And it's an ongoing topic. And the other thing that I will say is when I'm thinking through like the research that I've seen, there is a perception that there is this cool standard to hit, or we have to hit that a 10 out of 10 standard to really meet that need with Gen Z or communicate directly with them. And I just want to say, like, I don't think that there's one perception of how that could look. Whether you have TikTok or you don't have TikTok, there's things that we can take away from the learning and the information that we can implement in a way that works for our brand voice and, where our credit unions are sitting in their strategies, comms and content wise. There isn't one cool way. But yeah, I think really sticking to the community values and alignment, and really considering some of the research here today, there's a lot of opportunity. So it is very confusing at the start, but every effort is going to help bridge that connection.
Yeah, and I really feel like the things that you mentioned about Gen Z, the fact that they are a little more issue focused, a little more don't want to go with maybe the brands, the name brands out there. I think that they're probably a little more open to some of the things that credit unions are already promoting, already offering. So that's a great point too. Well, listen, I really appreciate your time. I think everybody who joined today got a lot out of this. I know I did. So thank you so much, Paige, and hopefully we can have you back sometime to talk on similar topics.
Thanks, Greg, and thank you everyone for your questions and engagement today.
Yeah. And if you like this event and if you want others to see it or you want to watch it again, you can refer them to the World Council YouTube channel. That's at youtube.com/WOCCU, WOCCU. It will be available there later today, and then going forward, it'll be available there. And just a reminder, if you're interested in taking part in further education and networking sessions like this one, you can still register for the 2022 World Credit Union Conference. That's going to be held in person from July 17th to the 20th in Glasgow, Scotland. We would love to see you there. You can register by visiting wcuc.org. And if you're not sure about registering, and if you want to hear more, you can listen to the latest episode of the Global Credit Union podcast. Robert Kelly, CEO of the Association of British Credit Unions, is the interview guest. He talks about all you have to look forward to in his hometown of Glasgow, and you can find that episode by going to anchor.fm/WOCCU. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great day.